Okay, this is the 11th of February 2021, and this is another Auti Thoughty. I'm going to talk a little bit about the generations as they apply to autistic people, because I think they are, to us, I think there's sort of a disconnect between how we relate to them and how, they are defined kind of by, for, and about the neurotypical people. Because I have, I've seen quite a lot of these, little charts going around on Facebook and whatever by, your date of birth, what you will remember if you are in this generational group, and, where various people are in their life, their life path, etc. And I find it has some uses, the generational system. But I also think the way it's talked about is becoming more and more a sort of 21st century astrology, where people have these sort of very clearly defined birth date ranges, and they seem to think that they can deduce your whole personality and outlook on life from that, which is a bit ridiculous, really. I am a millennial, by date of birth. But I often find, whenever you see a list of, characteristics, things you'll remember from your childhood, I often feel a lot more that I relate to the Generation X. And I think this is due to, a lot of my kind of autistic characteristics. I have a very long memory. I can clearly remember being 2-3 years old, which, as I described in my previous video, is not common. I was never, as a child, especially as a teenager, I was never particularly bothered about having all the latest clothes and gadgets and into modern music and everything. I was much more concerned with things like current affairs and politics and things than my peer group were. And I do think that sort of gave me an outlook that made me feel a lot older than I was. It's this odd thing that does seem to come up quite a lot when you ever get a group of autistic people talking to each other. They say that as children they often felt older than their years, or were told they had a very mature outlook, because they were sort of more interested in academia than sort of the ephemera of pop culture, mostly. But as they grow up, they tend to feel more childlike, because of, traits such as special interests and stimming and things that are kind of more associated with children, and are seen as being sort of quite juvenile when seen in an adult. But yeah, this is something that I kind of carried with me throughout my life. I mean, there is the phenomenon of the Xennial, the people who are sort of between X and millennial, but even though I'm sort of towards the millennial end of that by birth date, and more towards the X end of that by sort of childhood memories and such. And I think that, in terms of in terms of how knowledge of neurodiversity as a whole really has developed, I think that there is kind of a big generational thing there as well. I mean, they often talk about how we're defined by toys and inventions and things that defined our childhoods. I mean, the millennial, the word millennial comes about because our generation was defined by the millennium. Though I don't feel it really defined my childhood any more than, Pogs or video cassettes or anything like that, Because we were previously known as Generation Y, because before the millennium came along, we were defined by the Y bird. yeah, I think in terms of the understanding of autism, I think that that does sort of come in chunks that are very similar to the defined generations. I mean, to the boomers, it was kind of medical curiosity that no one else had ever heard of. To Generation X, probably very similar. I don't know. I mean, did Generation X understand it at all? Or was there any sort of public knowledge of it then? It was the millennial period, the 80s and 90s, that it really became more known in the mainstream, and it was a bit of a media curiosity for a while. I mean, there were films such as Rain Man and The Boy Who Could Fly and things that sort of put it more into the public consciousness and sort of spawned a lot of academic articles and things in newspapers about it. But it still wasn't understood. I had no idea what it was until very recently. And then you get the Gen Z, who are sort of more up to date, but still not really knowing exactly what it is. And then I think Generation Alpha, we're kind of getting a handle on it now. I think children who are born in this decade, kids my son's age, perhaps, he's 3, will have a fairly good idea of, what autism, ADHD, dyspraxia, etc. actually are. How it applies to them, how it applies to their friends and relatives. I mean, I see really good leaps coming on all the time. I mean, of course, I'm somebody who actually has an interest in these things and researches them and talks to autistic people. I'm not sure that the general population ever will. I mean, there's always going to be some haters, aren't there? There's always going to be someone who says, "Why can't you just be normal?" As I'm sure the gay community will attest. You find your little supportive bubble, but as soon as you stray outside that, there's still a lot of hate around and still a lot of ignorance. However much the far right like to whine about their freedom of speech being curtailed. So the generations and autism. I think one of the things that I really like about the idea of the generations is that it's fairly nebulous. I mean, whenever someone tries to sort of pin it down to a set of exact dates, it starts to lose meaning. And you see different dates. One website will say, "Oh, the millennials, they were born from 1980 to 97." Someone will say, "Oh, well, it was they started in the millennial era, started in 1985." So I'll say, "Oh, the millennial era didn't start until 1990." I think that sort of nebulousness is really the beauty of it, because you're talking about a broad age band. There's fuzzy edges to it. There's people who don't quite fit in, but they do seem in some way like these people because they're a bit more forward thinking or a bit behind the times somehow. Not everybody moves on with fashion and technology and such at the same time. When I was a kid, there were still a lot of people without tellies. I think I was probably one of the first people in my school that, as far as I'm aware, who got on the internet. But as I say, I was always very behind with things like fashion and having the latest toys and stuff, because I just wasn't interested as much. I was interested in the computers and the internet and that sort of side of things. yeah, I feel like the autistic generation seem to be sort of very um, behind the rest of the other generations in a way. You know, the sort of change aversion, um, the exceptionally long memories, like that. They kind of set us back a little bit, and perhaps also, you know, being is it too it too dramatic to call us a marginalised group, sort of misunderstood minority? You know, I think that does sort of give you a kind of older outlook, maybe more maturity, emotional maturity, maybe. Um, yeah, I think there is a place for the generational system in terms of you know, talking about what people of certain age groups are doing now as opposed to what they were doing a few decades ago. You know, like my my peer group, the millennials. You know, we're kind of 30ish now, but probably not doing what our parents, the boomers, were doing in their 30s. And, you know, our children, the Generation Alpha, they'll be doing something different in 30 years' time. Um, and it is a way of measuring, you know, societal trends, how we've been affected by things like recessions, wars, whatever else has gone on in our lifetimes. And in that respect, yeah, it is something that you know, that is useful when you're having these conversations about, you know, social trends, how they change, you know, over the long term. Um, yeah, as I say, I do think people are taking it far too seriously and are defining it far too sharply. Um, you know, like the "okay boomer" phrase. It's almost an ageist term. And I know it's sort of attacking an attitude more than, you know, people in their 60s. Um, yeah, the idea that people in their 60s are, you know, kind of racist, gammony types. Um, it's still sort of going for a sort of ageist stereotype, I think. And likewise, you see the word millennial being thrown around a lot and quite misused. Um, and quite often see well, people of all ages, really, people of all ages, assuming it just means teenagers. Or they think it's like a sort of fashion movement or something. But it's not, it's just people in their late 20s, 30s sort of age band. Um, I do wonder sometimes about, you know, the way we define people's ages. Um, like your age changes on your birthday. Why doesn't it change on your half birthday? You know, a child the day before their first birthday is 0 years old, even though they've been alive for a year. What's that all about? And then as soon as you actually hit that exact day you were born on, then your age moves up one, even though you're 1 day away from being exactly 1 year old. But yesterday you were 0 years old, even though you're 365 days away from being zero. Your 0th birthday. You don't really have a 0th birthday, do you? You just have a date of birth. I don't know. I don't think that was really the best example I could have picked, really. Your second birthday. You know, the day before your second birthday, you are nearly a year away from being one, but you're still technically one until the actual anniversary day of your birth, and then you become two until you are, you know, very nearly 3 years old, and then you become three. I mean, why don't they just change it at the 6 month mark? But anyway, well, the point I'm trying to come round to eventually is that after, childhood, when, change is quite fast, first 2 years of your life, you tend to measure your age in months and then it moves on to years. I think, why don't we just sort of define ages broadly? I mean, what is the difference really between being 38 and being 39? Or indeed 44? Or 32? I mean, could you say I am in my 30s and it be a perfectly valid answer to the question, how old are you? But yeah, I think the generation groupings are sort of reasonably accurate answers to the question, how old are you now? I mean, I am a millennial. That sort of tells you everything that anyone could possibly need to know about me. I am sort of childbearing age, I am of working age, um, I am sort of early to mid sequence adulthood. I'm not interested in things like higher education. I'm not really thinking about retirement yet. If I wasn't a married homeowner with a child, I'd probably be hoping to become that way soon. Yeah, I feel that it sort of defines you as well as anything. As well as any sort of precise number that you can put on your age. Your age last birthday. Um, um, I'm just thinking of a way of bringing this sort of back round to autism, but I can't really. I've sort of come to a bit of a dead end now. My cat's jumping around and distracting me. I think I'm going to leave it there. I'm just going to leave it there because I know it's only 17 minutes long, but I think that's long enough for that. Yeah, leave me a couple. How do you feel about the generational differences and how they apply to the autistic mind? Are they a neurotypical construct that we are not really defined by in the same way that they are, perhaps? Right, that's it. That's all I have. I'll see you next time.